One of the aspects which was unacceptable to the Prime Minister and indeed the Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, according to reports, and in fact Prime Minister said it herself in the Commons, was the idea of there being no time limit over a backstop. Even if this insurance policy is enacted, there needs to be a mechanism by which a time limit is enacted.
How can you say that? How can you tell the people of Ireland, as the British Prime Minister, who is the co-guarantor of an international agreement that is lodged at the United Nations, and within that, built into it, strands 1 and strands 2 is predicated on EU law. How can you then say that you want to have some kind of temporary arrangement that is going to damage a peace process? People should not be surprised that the EU is going to stand up and stand over because of the work that Sinn Féin has been doing in the European Parliament to get the MEPs and all here, the negotiators, understanding what the Good Friday Agreement is about. So the British government is being reckless and wrong to say that our peace process is temporary. Our peace process isn't temporary. There's nothing temporary about it. So it was wrong for her to have a temporary clause into a backstop. That was like putting a temporary time date on when there could be potential possible damage done to a peace process. Surely no one in their right mind, no right thinking individual in Britain would want to do any damage to a peace process.
What about this response from the EU of we seen your idea of a backstop, your proposal to counter our idea of a backstop, we propose a backstop to a backstop, which the Prime Minister said is an insurance policy of an insurance policy. Surely that gets to the point, as many people have heard, where it just seems a bit ridiculous to have a backstop of a backstop.
Look, whatever kind of language or terminology that you use, the backstop to the backstop or the original proposal was put on the table. Theresa May has brought forward a proposal around a temporary custom union. We cannot have a situation in Ireland, in the north of Ireland, that part of it is in the custom union and part of it is not. The part of it is in the single market and part of it is not. All of that drives a coach and horse through the Good Friday Agreement. So therefore, if we're going to have a future relationship, if it's going to be a comprehensive free trade agreement, then you're not going to have to really worry about the backstop, but it's there. It's there to protect what everyone in Britain should be desperately trying to protect, an international agreement that's lodged at the United Nations, which is a peace process. And therefore, in order for us to operate the strands 1 and strands 2, what happens not just in the north of Ireland, but what happens between the island, then you need to ensure that you protect and preserve that. That's what the backstop does at its minimum.
One of the ideas about how you can facilitate some kind of arrangement on that border is technology, and that's something which indeed the customs plans for the Chequers agreement, looking more in the future arrangement. Let's talk about the Chequers plan. Now, we haven't spoken since they were published. Idea of a common rule book for goods but not services on the border, technology being the key aspect to facilitating frictionless movement of goods and trade and people. Is that a practical solution? Because many in the government, many outside the government think it is.
Well, they
at least, maybe not now, maybe possibly in years down the line when technology is there.
Yeah, because, you know, somebody somewhere might invent something that might solve the problem. You know, there's no third country infrastructure-free border. This notion of technology, it doesn't exist, and I know that they hope that somebody might invent something that might prevent it. Let's deal with reality, not with fiction. You know, we've already had from the two Brexiteers that are most vocal in this, Rees-Mogg and Boris Johnson, who's put an alternative to the Chequers plan, and they were asked what it was called, and like, I have to say, some people might have thought it was in some way funny that they used a Mary Poppins, you know, terminology. Walt Disney, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious is what they said they could call it. And Theresa May has come up with this notion of how, for instance, in Chequers it could work. Do you not think it's somewhat ironic? Does the British people not just stand back? Because I respect the fact, absolutely respect the fact that the British people voted to leave the EU, but they want to take control, as they argue, of their own laws, but they want to take control of the EU's laws as well. So that is why it was absolutely absolutely unreasonable and unachievable for Chequers' plan to work, let alone this notion of there would be somebody somewhere at some stage will devise infrastructure that doesn't currently exist.
What is then the fundamental endpoint do you see of this? If you say Chequers is not going to work, if, as Theresa May is about to go to the European Council meeting, put forward, pushing for a plan, a backstop proposal, as well as a future agreement, what do you realistically see, both within the red lines of UK and the EU, as the solution to the border on the island of Ireland? In reality, what is the end goal?
Well, the end game was for Theresa May to implement what she agreed to do and to honour commitments. And I know sometimes it's difficult for a British government, and I have to say this, and we have experience of this, to implement and honour commitments that they made. They made commitments in December of last year that they would do one of three things. They would ultimately ensure that there would be no hard border on the island of Ireland, and they would preserve and protect the Good Friday Agreement and all of its parts. They said they would have a future relationship and a future agreement that would stop that in a deal. They haven't actually put one credible proposal on the table that's going to guarantee that that would not happen. They then says they will bring about something specific. You're telling me tomorrow she might come across with some specific proposals that might actually deal with this. Let's wait and see. But the third thing she said, in the event of them not having a deal, in the event of them not bringing forward a reasonable, credible proposal, that they would agree to full alignment on the island of Ireland, and Ireland, the north of Ireland, staying aligned to the custom union and single market. Now, she signed off on that in December, and then she confirmed that in March. Because the British government is in chaos, because it's been propped up by a minority party in the north that doesn't represent the views of the majority of the people, cross-section of society who voted to remain in the EU, doesn't represent the majority of the views of the business community who want to stay in the single market, who wants to stay in the custom union. And just to stand still, what the British government has to do is enter into a deal-by-deal authorisation with 164 countries, other than even what she's going to have to do here. So what we are saying, we have got to preserve what we have in the island of Ireland. There was an agreement across Ireland, the Good Friday Agreement, that promised the people and guaranteed the people that the constitutional position of the north of Ireland would not change unless we consented to it. Well, we did not consent to this. It's your mess. I wish you well with it. I wish Britain well with it. I want them to have a future relationship for their people that actually resolves this difficulty. But we're not going to be collateral damage. They've done enough damage to Ireland. We want to continue on with our peace and our political process, and we really just want them to get off our backs and allow us to pursue with dignity and determination what we need to do on the island of Ireland, and not to do anything that's going to damage us.